In this lesson, we will learn to use the save method on the Hibernate API to transition an entity from the transient state to the persistent state. Now, this will subsequently cause the entity to be persisted to the database via an insert statement. So we have this example here, and the first thing you see is that we create a session, and that creates a new persistence context. Now we need to create a transient entity. I'm going to make an account, and I actually have a helper method to build an account object. So here it instantiates that new instance of an account and then sets all of the fields. We're also going to build two transactions. So here we're talking about purchases, and I have similar methods built to construct these transactions. There's a belt purchase and a shoe purchase. And now we're going to get the transactions on the account, and we will add the first transaction as well as the second. Now, just for debugging purposes, what I'm going to do is actually print out whether the session contains each of these entities. So does the session contain the account? Does it also contain the first and second transactions? So we have our entity being created and some fields being set, and then we print out some debugging information. The next thing we need to do is create an actual Hibernate transaction, and we do that using the session and we call the begin transaction method. We'll need to fully qualify that type since we have two objects named transaction. On our transaction, we're going to eventually commit everything, and that's after we call the save operation on the account. Now, one thing we should know about account is that the transactions field has been set up so that the save operation will cascade to the transactions that are associated with the account. And since we're saving our entity, what I'd like to do is now print our debugging information after that save so we can see if our objects get transitioned over to that persistent state. So here we're starting in a transient state. We're calling the save operation, and we should be moving into a persistent state. These objects should now be managed by the persistence context. Let's run the demonstration. So we'll save the application. At first, those three objects were not associated with the persistence context, and then we perform our save operation, and then once we check, they are now contained within our persistence context and associated with our session. We can also go to our database, and we see that our account has been stored. It was a savings account. We have $50 initially. This was Hibernate's save method on its API, and it is how we transition a transient entity into a persistent entity.